Hello, friends. Welcome to On the Couch program. We are super excited that you'll be joining us. On the Couch is going to be aired every Friday evening at 7 p.m. on our YouTube channel. This program will be focused on answering questions around really difficult topics of finance, family dynamics, parenting, dating, and divorce. So if any of these topics are affecting anyone that you care about or even yourself, please tune in for some biblical answers. We would love to hear from you as well on your own questions, so please send that in to our email address, which will be located in the details below. Thanks so much. We look forward to hearing from you.
Financial problems, troubled family relationships, unplanned pregnancy, broken marriage, delinquent children, or overwhelming grief. Are you burdened by the care of life? Are you feeling hopeless? Friend, whatever you are going through, whatever questions you may have, God has the answers. We invite you to join us on the Couch, a Bible-based program that will give you insight into what the Bible says about these critical issues of life. We present to you On the Couch, finding hope in the midst of a crisis.
Welcome to another episode of On the Couch, a show where we talk about family dynamics, dating, finances, and many more questions that you have. This evening we have the privilege of having Pastor Keith Gray with us, who will be talking on the subject of dating.
Pastor Gray, we want to thank you so much for being with us this evening for another episode of On the Couch. Pastor Gray, would you mind telling us a little bit about who you are and why this subject on dating?
Sure. I am Pastor Keith Gray. I am the head pastor and the associate pastor and the assistant pastor of the Acts 2 Seventh-day Adventist Church in Plano, Texas. I was born in Albuquerque, New Mexico, but I've lived in Texas just about all of my life. I grew up right there in H-Town, southeast Texas. I grew up at the Belford SDA Church and came back for a while. I was the youth director for the Great Southwest Region Conference, youth director in family life. So to answer your second question, dating and relationships and marriage and all of those things are things that I did not start off thinking that this was going to be a hot topic for me. But God pushed my wife and I into our anointing, I like to say. And it has become something that is a stationary in my ministry. So I've been doing that for pretty much as long as I've been married. And I've been married to the same wife. And she still wants to carry my last name. We've been married for over 30 years now. We've got one child who is 13 years old, so you pray for the pastor greatly as we go through these teenage years. Even so, come quickly, Lord Jesus.
Amen.
But that's in a nutshell.
Pastor, I think it's perfect for you to be hitting the subject on dating as you have a teenager. One of the things that I think I, as a father as well, and I think many other people, that have little ones, mine is 1.5, it's one of those days that I do not look forward to, especially as the world changes around us. I do not look forward to dating. So the main question here, we tend to throw around these two different concepts. In the church, we tend to throw around the term courting, and then we tend to throw around the term dating. Is there a difference between dating and courting? Are they the same? Are they different? What can you tell us about that?
Well, part of it is we're talking terminologies. And when you're just looking at it from this term of terminologies, they may be one and the same. But chances are anybody who is courting sees a difference. People who are dating, they think it's tomato. I see a very big difference. Dating is entertainment. Courting is for a purpose. I'm looking for something. Dating is, hey, let's have fun, let's go out, it's about having a good time. And there's nothing wrong with having a good time, but it's not to be mistaken with, I'm looking for someone to share the rest of my life with. And so the rules are completely different. And where frustration comes in is when somebody who's got a dating mentality meets somebody who's got a courting mentality. And those two worlds are very, very different. So if you're talking to somebody who's dating and they run into somebody who's courting, their usual response is going to be, whoa, he's too serious. She's too, my goodness, it's not all that. You talk to somebody who's courting and they run into somebody who's dating, it's like, you're not serious enough. I need to look elsewhere because and so we're missing quite a bit in that dynamic. And we just chalk them up to, it was a bad date or it wasn't a good fit. And the problem is, we got completely different mindsets about where those things are. Another big difference that's there, and I hope you guys don't mind me speaking frankly, because that's kind of the way that I am, and
No, please, by all means, as frank as you can be. I mean,
dating in the United States, at least, because that's where my area of understanding has been. Dating in the United States is built on a lie. Let me give you an idea. You're going out on a date. So you're going to dress up in clothes that you don't normally dress up in. You're going to smell like you don't normally smell to get into a car that probably isn't even yours to impress somebody who's doing all those same things for you, going out to a restaurant that normally you're not going to eat at because you can't afford it. You borrowed money from somebody so that you could impress this person with this meal that is not going to be who you are as you're going. And the lies continue. The lies continue. She's going to put on lashes that are not really hers, and nails that are not really hers, and makeup that's not the way she looks like when you see her in the morning. So the person that I see on Facebook that you're on a date with looks completely different from the person 2 years later that you're married to. It's built on a lie. Courting at least gives you the mindset that when we start this thing off, we're both looking for the same thing, even if you and I are not the same, are not the people that are going to wind up together. It is a wonderful experience finding out that I don't have to take you off the shelf. I can allow you to move on down the line for whoever it is that God is saving you for, because I know it isn't me. And it's easy to walk away from that situation. God bless you. I'll come to your wedding if all things work out, and you come to mine, when you have the mindset for courting. So it's a completely different thing.
well, Pastor, I wish I would have met you several years ago. Yeah, you could have changed my life in so many different ways and saved me a lot of money from trying to impress my wife. So, but I find that it's a very interesting concept that you say that dating is based on a lie, because we don't think about it in those terms. All we think about it in terms is when I was dating my wife, when we were courting. I use them interchangeably now, but when we were dating, it was about impressions. It was about giving this appearance that I had more money than what I really had, because I felt if I didn't show her that I could provide for her, that she was going to leave me for somebody that could provide for her. Mm-hmm. Obviously, that's not the case now, and she knows that I can provide for her without needing to go and do all these fancy things. But I do find it very interesting that that's become the reality for who we are as a society, that we feel like we have to, the term gets thrown around, dress to impress. And that's really what it is, and it's, we put ourselves into debt, which is a completely different conversation for another time. But we put ourselves into debt to impress people for short periods of time with no long-term plan. And then we pay for it later down the road. So I do find that very interesting that you mentioned that.
And since you're on that subject, you realize it's not just that you pay for it. If I fool you, if I win, and I fool you into accepting the image that I have, you get to help me pay for the date years down the line that I couldn't afford in the first place, because my credit becomes your credit and we are all going through this together. So yeah, it's a double whammy, and getting frank with that if you're going to be in a single during this day. And I'm glad that I'm not single right now, because that can be challenging.
Yeah, definitely. I tell my wife the same thing all the time, that I'm glad that we don't have to date in this day and age, because it definitely would be a mess. But
yeah,
speaking on terms of dating, one of the things that we tend to see when two teenagers date or young adults date is that one seems to think that the other monopolizes all their time. And it's not always the case, but there's always that factor. Well, you don't spend enough time with me, or you spend too much time with your friends, and you need to spend more time with me, and we need to go out on more dates. We need to go do stuff together. Or you run into the case where you try to, include your date, or the person that you are dating into your life, and they tell you, well, those aren't my type of people that I want to hang out with. And a lot of the times it ends up touching on people from the church, and they say, well, I don't really like those church activities. I don't really like those spiritual activities. So is that normal? Is that something that we need to look out for when we're dating people? Should we stay with, and I know I'm throwing a lot of questions at you, but they all kind of come to the same thing. Is it something that we need to be on the lookout for when we're dating, that we date inside of a specific parameter? So let's talk a little bit about that.
I would say, again, and I don't mind restating, this is one of the reasons why there's a difference between dating and courting. Mm-hmm. If you're dating, you're going to be gone in 3 to 6 months anyway. Mm-hmm. So the fact that you don't, maybe I can put my friends and family to the side because you seem to be interested in the lie you're purporting seems to be interesting enough for me to do that. And I will in turn lie to you and say that my family and my friends are not as important to me, even though they've known me since I was 8 or they've known me since birth. They're not as important to me as you are. When I'm dating, maybe it's not a big deal. But if I'm looking for someone who's going to be my partner for life, one of the things that you got to understand is when you marry somebody, you marry all that they are. And that includes family, that includes friends. And when you have somebody with the mindset that is trying to suck you away from that which is the norm for you, you really need to go into that with your eyes wide open. And I'm not going to say that it's negative, because there may be situations that occur where maybe those are positive ways that you're being pulled out of an environment. Maybe the environment that you are accustomed in is not the best, or is less than the potential that you could be. And so you need to evaluate. But whether that's the case, or it's simply this person wants a monopoly on my time and on my life, the thing is, if you're looking towards getting married, recognize that doesn't stop when you get married. Whatever is going on in your courtship life, what marriage does is it shines a magnifying glass on it and it grows. Consider, for example, little things that you thought were cute, or at the very most little perturbing things about the person you were dating. If she's still doing that, if he's still doing that after you're married, those are the things that rake across your nerves. They grow. The fact that, she doesn't have her finances together, you go, oh, that's cute. I get to feel like a knight in shining armor. Well, that armor is going to get real rusty later on when you inherit the bad credit that she has and the bills that are there and all the hidden stuff that you did not plan on taking on, and now that stuff is yours and it's magnified. And now we got issues. So I would say, trying to get back to what it is your initial question was, if there are some things, those are things that you need to talk about. If your mindset is, I'm looking for who God has in mind. Not saying I'm trying to get married this year. It may be some time that's going on there. And those are conversations we'll have, as we talk later on. But right now, I mean, hey, this is a part of who I am. Why are we having this issue? And I need to really consider if those answers are valid enough for me to want to continue moving in this direction.
So it's funny that you mentioned, that the types of things that we notice when we're dating, we find cute and then we move on, or just the monopoly of time. It seems to be, like you said, it multiplies once we get more serious and once we move down the line. So how do we set up boundaries? I think that's a very important thing to do, and set up boundaries when we're dating. So how do we do that?
Okay. First thing, boundaries have got to be set up before you go out dating. Your boundaries. You need to figure out what your boundaries are, and not what works for this particular relationship that I happen to be in. What boundaries come from what you value. Do you value your purity? And I'm asking that as a genuine question, because only you can answer. I know this is church, and we want to answer the way that everybody, of course, that's very important to me. And maybe it's not. But you need to decide what your boundaries are long before you start dating. And those are personal. And you need to know what pushes you over the edge. I don't think we spend enough time thinking about that. We go in and we're trying to figure things out, and I hear, well, we didn't mean to go that far. It just kind of happened. Well, it kind of happened because either you didn't care enough to set boundaries, you didn't know enough to set boundaries, or whatever the case may be. But boundaries are more than, I will only go this far. Because where you go is dependent on where it is you lose control mentally, and your body begins to take up and do what it is that naturally is going to occur. So you need to know at what point that is, and that's different for different people. For some, it might be if we are in romantic kisses, or there is groping and touching and the whole 9 yards. That might be too much. For somebody else, it might be a peck on the cheek, and suddenly you need to figure out what those are for yourself and say, if I value this, I'm going to set my boundaries here. So if I'm dealing with somebody who my boundaries are not their boundaries, or they're not willing to respect my boundaries, the key word in there is the word respect. Because if this is my values and this is my boundaries, and you will not respect my boundaries, what does it say about our future relationship? Take it outside the realm of relationship and put it inside the realm of ownership. If you have a house, your fence is a boundary. Are you going to invite the person who kicks in your fence to be your lifetime mate inside your house? Or are you going to allow the person who's jimmying the lock on your door, and this is going to be the person you're going to entrust your home to? Chances are no, because if you can't trust my boundaries, there's a whole lot of other things that you won't respect either. So understand that. Also, if you can't respect my boundaries, I can wonder what your boundaries are. And are you willing to respect those? And I can't place my life in the hands of someone who has no boundaries.
we've established these boundaries. I've made my boundaries clear to the person that I'm dating. I don't, for the sake of this example, I don't want to get intimate. I want to stay pure. I want to stay pure until we get married, if that's the road that we're heading down. But the person that I'm dating seems to be pushing more and more and more and more in that direction, more towards intimacy. What do I do? I love this person, or at least I think I do. I love this person, and I don't want to lose them. But what do I do?
When it comes to that, I got to speak in generalities. Everybody is different, and I recognize that everybody is different. But usually somebody who does not respect my boundaries is probably not in it for the long haul. Somebody who breaks into my house is probably not going to stay around to have dinner and clean up and do the dishes afterwards. They are in for what it is they can get, and then they'll be gone. They'll keep knocking and they'll keep pretending all the way around, but if you're pushing my boundaries, be careful giving your emotion to someone who does not respect your boundaries. Because your value system, you need to look at your value system as this is you. And if they're not going to respect you, then you need to pull yourself apart. Incidentally, that's one of the reasons why you don't want to be intimate. Intimacy makes it 10 times harder when it's time to break up. Because you have allowed what God designed to be a connection that would glue you together with an individual. You've allowed it to be something that's casual. And you take two pieces of paper, if you glue them together and try and pull them apart, you're going to do damage to the paper that's there. And we've gotten into a society that believes in, as I use that illustration, sex being glue. We got a whole lot of glue sniffing folk when it comes to relationships. And it makes it harder. And if you're not thinking, even if you're mathematically thinking, of all the people that you date, you're going to sit, let's say you date 10 people in your dating time, and one of them is going to be your spouse. That means you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 breakups that you need to calculate are going in. How is that going to go when you got pieces of you stuck to Susan, pieces of you stuck to Mary and Martha and Jane and all the other things that are going on, and all of that weight comes on whoever is the one that you said yes to. So there's a lot that's at stake, and you gotta value yourself, your boundaries. That's where the question is. Do I love myself more than this other person? Do I love my values more than I love this other individual? And if not, I really pray you're right.
Is there a acceptable level of, touching? I have my boundaries, but, I don't want to get intimate, but, getting a little handsy doesn't really seem that bad to me. From our perspective, should there be, boundaries when it comes to touching that should not be moved? Or is there an appropriate level that we can get to? I've heard this illustration that anything inside of a certain triangle is completely off limits, from the neck up, and, from the neck up, everything is okay, everything else is off limits. Is that individual? Is there a gold standard for this type of behavior?
I'm careful about the gold standards of things. This is where knowing who you are, knowing yourself, and understanding these are my triggers that go. And those are different for everybody. Those are different. That kiss might be all that we need. I mean, the average movie, that's what they give you, the idea. If you see a couple kiss, the next thing you see the candles dying down, and they've been intimate all night. And so we adopted that mindset, and you better believe that physiologically we have a tendency to try and emulate what it is we've spent a pattern watching and what it is we spend a pattern consuming. So what I would go back to is this. You need to think of it this way. Let's say that your thought process when it comes to dating is that too far is intimacy. That's off the cliff. That is falling off the cliff. And I don't want to fall off the cliff. So I'm going to put a boundary line right at the edge where I would fall off the cliff. And many folks do that. This is too far. But what you don't understand is that dating is you not on a cliff that's solid. It's you on a ledge. So you're saying, I won't go off this cliff area. But the reality is, the ground gets real weak back here. If your boundary is here, but the ground is weak here, guess what happens when you get here? You slide down, and then suddenly it's like we lost control, and I don't know what happened. And before you know it, it's very difficult to get back onto that cliff once you've gone over on it. So your boundary needs to be back here. This is solid ground for me, and it's for me. And the other thing, again, the difference between a dating mindset and one that is courting or it's headed somewhere, a dating mindset is, how much fun can I have on Saturday night? A courting mindset is, I'm looking for the long haul. So no, I'm not going to spend all my money on you. And I'm looking for more out of this encounter than how far can I go without stopping. I'm trying to hold some things up, and I'm looking to see if you're somebody who's willing to hold up what, even if your boundaries are different than mine. You respect my boundaries. Do you care enough about me that that's important to you? And if not, I need to let you go find somebody, because you're going to be frustrated. And frustration means the chances are you're going to try and hold on to this and get your needs met someplace else. And that's where a lot of people wind up getting hurt. So communication about that, that's key. But normally in dating, that is like, okay, too much. You know, you pick the girl up and you're going out. Okay, let's talk about boundaries. What? In the dating mindset, we're not going to talk about boundaries because it doesn't lend itself to the lie. In a courting mindset, okay, hey, great, I'm glad you said yes. Let's kind of talk about what we can expect. I want to make sure that I'm treating you with respect. And as far as things go, you know, the guy who's looking and has a value system, open up your mouth, lead out, speak up. Ladies, if he doesn't or he's nervous about it, open up your mouth, speak up. And if we got problems with that from the jump, hey, there's always something on Netflix tonight.
You know, I think one of the laws that we should buy into is that if we are in love, you know, and so talking on this subject a little bit, you know, if we are in love, we will, you know, based on what we've seen, what we've heard, what we've read, love leads to sexual intimacy. And even though I've set up that boundary, sometimes that lie creeps in and it says, well, if you love me or if we love each other, let's prove our love to each other. You know, how do I know the difference, or how can I distinguish between, do I truly love this person, or do I love the idea of sexual relations with this person?
Okay, the number one thing I would say is that we have a false concept of what love is. What we hear on the radio, what we watch on television, what we even see in our romantic comedies, even the best ones, and being married as I am to a woman who loves romantic comedies, I've seen more than my fair share. Having said all that, what we see, that's not love. Most of that is what we would call attraction. Now, God created the attraction as well. There is a reason why when Adam saw Eve for the first time, he yells out, "Woo, man!" and the name stuck. There's a reason for that. And God created that as well. But that's not what love is. And it goes away after a time. Love is what happens when I've decided to love you. I have made up my mind. It's not an emotional pull. True love is not something you fall into. You got to stand up to love. Love is what happens when you ain't cute anymore. Love is the decision. You're on my nerves, but I'm going to come home anyway. That's where love. And anybody who's been married for more than a minute, you understand what it is I'm talking about, no matter how cute your spouse is. You know exactly what it is I'm talking about. Love is, I can walk into the bathroom with you after you've done your business, and I'm okay with you there. Those are things that are measures of where love is. And we have a tendency to think, because I get goose pimples when you come, those are what all the love songs are about. I can't breathe without you. Well, if that relationship stays on, you are going to die. I can't, I can't sleep, I can't eat, then you're not gonna, I can't think, then you're gonna be broke. That's not what love is all about. Love is the love that the Bible talks about, that for God so loved is the love of decision. I have chosen to love you. And here's the thing about it. It goes so deep. It doesn't matter if you choose to love me back. The deepest love that I can have is a love that says, I love you because I decided to do it. And your response to that love does not change that love. That's why God needs to be a part of any of those relationships, because the best we can generate, humanly speaking, is I love you because you love me because I love you. And we talk about that 50-50 partnership. And love isn't a 50-50 partnership, because where's your other 50% going? Love is a 100 partnership. So if you don't have your 50 today, I got you. And there's no question. When it's 50-50, you stop cooking, I stop doing the lawn. You stop doing the laundry, I stop putting gas in your car. And we start playing these games that don't have anything to do with love. When you want to understand what love is, you need to not look at the romantic perspective and say, why shouldn't we test out our love? That's not what it is. Love is not how well you guys have sex together. Love is about what happens after you get out of that bed. And for typically in a dating situation, you know what happens after you get out of that bed? Nothing. Nothing happens. Nothing. It's awkward. It's strange, and you wind up wondering, should I have done this? And will there be a phone call tomorrow? That's not love. That isn't. That's not what God had in mind. That's not the gamble that's there. And the problem is, the way you described it, we go from, if we have this attraction and we kiss, then that's going to lead to making love. And we skip a part, because love is supposed to lead to marriage. And the making love is something that solidifies that, not the other way around.
So these urges, they're very natural to a certain extent, because like you mentioned, this is the way that God created us.
Sure.
How do we control these urges? If we want to remain sexually pure, how do we control these urges then? Because we do have this misunderstanding from what the world has told us. So how do we control that?
Okay. First thing I'll say this is to know that when God created Adam and Eve and they sinned, there's one thing he never took back from them. There's one thing that God never took back from them. He gave them dominion, and they still had it. So the first thing that you need to recognize is that you've been given dominion, and that includes your appetites. We forget it, and we think, well, it's biological, it's perfectly natural, why wouldn't I want it? Let me help you understand. It's perfectly natural for me to want to eat a full key lime pie. That's natural. It's delicious. I love it. My brain, all the boutons go off and say, yes, more of this. Should I be able to control that? Should I have to? Anybody in this health conscious area would say, absolutely. You got to control it. You got to. Why not that when it comes to our sexuality? Here's the reason why we can't. Especially, I'm going to talk especially to those of us who are men, because for the most part, there are some differences in your relationship may be completely different. But for the most part, it still is, sex is usually the push or the greatest, I got these urges that it comes from us. What men don't understand is we feed our urges by what we watch, by what we see. David says it this way: I have made a covenant with my eyes that I will do no ungodly thing. He had made a deal with his eyes. Why? Because David understood by his own life, my eyes are what gets me in trouble. He understood it. Samson understood it as well. You go back to the story of Samson. Samson does not start making wise decisions until they take away from him the one place that is his weakness. Well, the Philistines messed up is they took out his eyes. When he couldn't see, suddenly Samson found a prayer life. Suddenly Samson's like, Lord, it's you and me in here. So what was the problem? So my point is, when it comes to those urges, if I start, again, looking at the ledge as that point, if I start here and recognize if I'm not feeding myself with all that's there and allowing myself to eat whatever it is that comes to my eyes, if I am starting in the control of making sure that I have that under control, then I don't feed myself with, I gotta have more of, I gotta have more of. And then this courting relationship gets better, because stuff that if my eyes were driven by everything that it is I'm seeing, when I cut that back, I can be excited about seeing you, and it's not all flesh that's making me excited. So there are ways of controlling that. It's just, if you're going to do it the way God designed, you can't cut the corners on it. He's got to have it all. And I got to start from further back than most folks are willing to.
So literally cut your eyes out by protecting.
No, I'm not recommending that. I'm not recommending the Samson way of maintaining purity.
A lot of the times we do take it literally. The Bible says if your hand causes you to sin, cut off your hand. It's better to enter the kingdom of heaven without a hand than it is to, Right. But, I do find that very interesting that you put it that way, that, once we make that conscious decision to go not literally blind, but that we make that conscious decision to blind ourselves from everything other than our ultimate goal, both in our spiritual life, our courtships, our marriage, and all this, that, and the other thing. Everything goes a lot better because we're not focused on what we see in our peripherals. We're focused on what we see in front of us in our ultimate goal. Unfortunately, that's not the case for everyone.
No.
And sometimes we step into it. Sometimes we let our eyes, deceive us, and we fall into that trap of committing, sexual relations or sexual immorality before we get married. If I have done that, do I need to disclose that to the person that I am dating or that I am going to court?
I don't think you need to wear a t-shirt on the first date saying, hey, I've been active, or whatever the case may be. But the more serious you become as you start looking at this as a potential life partner, the thing that you're trying to develop is intimacy. And intimacy is not sex. Intimacy, because we like to say, well, they've been intimate. Well, that's a misnomer as well. There's a whole lot of sex that goes on that has absolutely nothing to do with intimacy at all. Intimacy, if you want to get a quick definition, is into me see. That's what you're looking for. So I can't have something that is going to be of vital importance to me and to you as you being my future mate, and you don't know about it. You don't know about it. That's not intimacy. Do I have to give you a detailed how many and who and all? Probably not. I'm probably not going to be interested in that. But if I've got a history, that person marries my history. In a sense, if you're a young lady and you've been sexually active, your husband gets to have relations with everybody you've been intimate with. And vice versa. And all of those experiences that you've had, you carry in. And psychologically, when let's say I've been active, let's say I've slept with 4 or 5 people, and they're all different. There was my first love when I was a teenager, and then there was somebody else who, was just this wild party and she just completely blew my mind with all the crazy things that she did. And then there was this person. What we bring into the marriage bed, we're expecting subconsciously for this, unless we've done something that God has redeemed and God has restored, and God can do that. But if I'm afraid to share it with you, chances are I'm not really talking to God about it either. But I'm bringing all of those expectations into this one woman. I wanted her to be like the first love. I wanted her to be like the friendly one that was sex with benefits, and I wanted her to be like Wild Thing, and I'm bringing that all in on this one end, and that's not fair or right. So how we address those issues are a part of it. Furthermore, what it says, if you're coming to me and you're saying, look, I really have enjoyed the time I spent with you. You seem to be the kind of man that I'd like to spend the rest of my life with. And so I'm going to open up to you about what's been very private in my life. If I care about you, what that says to me is this person loves me enough to tell me the truth, even if it's stuff that I don't want to hear. I can respect that. Will everybody? Maybe not. Maybe not. The last thing I want is, even if I can get away with it, do you really, really want your relationship built on a dating lie?
So is there coming back from that? If myself and my date have, had sex, is there coming back from that? Can we go back on that, and can we have an assurance of when we take the proper steps, when we focus on the ultimate goal, which is to get married? Do we have hope for a healthy sex life after that?
My Bible says Jesus makes all things new. We have a tendency to think that has to do with my heart as it means me going to church when I didn't before. When I say all things new, I mean all things new. So God restores. Will it be different? Yes, it will be different. But yes, absolutely, there is a redemption from that. And there is, you're brand new, but you're going to have to want that. And wanting that means, I need to take some time to get that out of my system. I need to take some time, and that requires some time sometimes. So if I don't want, the last 4 folks alive and in my bedroom along with me, then I need to start working through that. Take some time to, okay, Lord, I need you to free me from. But can it? Absolutely. Or God isn't telling the truth. God tells the truth. Behold, I make all things brand new.
So, 2 things. One, should we have a contingency plan in case we get into trouble? Should I have, protection in my back pocket just in case we can't control our desires? Or should I, as a woman, be on birth control in case something happens? Because, things might get stirred up. Or is that a recipe for disaster?
I think often that's a hard one. I'll be open and honest with you. That's a hard one, because when I look at all of the unwanted pregnancies that go into the political discussions that we're dealing with about whether or not a woman has a right to get an abortion or not, all of those things, everybody looks at that act. Do I have the right to abort a child? And everybody has their own feelings in regards to that. And where the rubber meets the road that nobody's talking about is this, that you absolutely have a choice in the matter of, and how do we address that? When you look at all the unwanted pregnancies that are either taking place and we're bringing kids into this world that have no plan made for them, or we're aborting children who could be into this world because they were inconvenient for us. The tendency seems like if I make the contingency plan, I usually have a tendency to plan on the contingency. So if I got condoms in my wallet, every time I go into my wallet is the reminder, hey, just here, I got your back. And when I think that way, chances are it's a lot easier. I would believe it's a lot easier for me to get into a situation that is less than. Now, here's the other problem that we have in our society. And here's where folks are going to want to call the conference office on me. And I accept that 100% as this goes out. Here is, so I'm going to say something real radical here as we're talking about this. We get excited and we get offended in our church about unwanted pregnancy. And in Scripture, I challenge anyone to show me where pregnancy is the sin. It's not in there. But That's what we've put people out of the church for. She got pregnant at age 15. We call the board. We got to do something. Church discipline. We can't have things running around willy-nilly. But here's the problem. How many people knew before she got pregnant what was going on? And nobody said anything. So what we tell our young people is, it's okay. Boys will be boys and girls will be girls with boys that will be boys. Just don't get caught. So we're looking at the contingency plan, not about respecting the purity, but we're looking at the contingency plan because if I don't want to get caught in something that is life-altering as a result. And I think that minimizes what it is our purity. Purity is not, I did not get pregnant. Purity is that there's been one. This is the one. So having said all of that, I'm going to leave you to make up your own mind because you're going to have to make it up anyway. I can't go in your wallet and slap the condoms out, and I can't make you not to. I'm not going to get into all the shades of gray that may be in there. Here it is. I'm wanting to ask you, does this help you with your goal? And the goal of purity, does me having condoms or me having birth control or contraception, does that help me towards the goal? Those are the real questions that are there.
You touched on something very important that I kind of want to jump on. You mentioned something about how many people knew that this was going on and did not say anything, did not help us. Is it important to have a support network to stay grounded and accountable while I'm dating somebody?
Yes, it's critical. It's critical. It's critical. The same thing that helps someone who's trying to get out of something that they are addicted to. The reason why Alcoholics Anonymous works, and it's not like, why do we try to have an Alcoholics Anonymous? Trust me, I'm going to try and bring my best to get us back where we're. The reason why Alcoholics Anonymous works is because one of the foundational things that they have is, I have somebody who is that I'm accountable to. I have somebody that when I feel like I need a drink, I can call and say, hey, things are getting too much. Help back me off this cliff. And when I've gone too far, I've got somebody I got to look in the face and say, hey, I messed up. I got to start over again. Same thing with somebody who's addicted to porn. One of the best things that you can have is somebody who has a right to question where you are in that area. What works after an addiction also works to prevent it. There is a reason why Daniel hooks up with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And it's not necessarily about sexuality, but it's a whole lot harder to break the principles that I made when I got to look people in the eye that I've made this covenant relationship with. This is the reason why God said, go in twos when you go to do the Bible study. This is the reason why God said, forsake not the assembly together, because we are accountable to one another, and that holds us up to a higher standard. And I can run farther in a marathon if I'm running with a group of people who are helping to push me and carry me than I can if I'm running all by myself uphill. So the same thing goes. Hey, look, I'm getting ready to go on this date. I'm going to need you to check in on me. And I'm going to do the same thing with you when you go out next Saturday. That's imperative. But what it takes is you can't just do that with anybody. You got to do that with somebody who has the same value system that you have.
So, we talked about dating and courtship are two different things, and courtship is the one that ultimately leads to marriage. How do I know that I have been with someone to move to the point of marriage. Whether that's, I dated them, courtship, courtship obviously is the way to get to marriage. But how do I know that this is the person that God has chosen for me?
Okay. I'm glad the way you worded it. Here's what a lot of people ask. How do I know if I found the one? I'll be honest with you. That terminology bothers me. As a Seventh-day Adventist Christian pastor, it bothers me, and I'll tell you why. That idea of the one, and here's the way that we word it, and we even word it that way in the Christian church. My soulmate. You know where that came from? The ideology of a soulmate? It came from the Greek philosophy that said whenever a child was born, there were two souls in it, and one was male and one was female. And when the child was born, that soul went into, if it was a male child, that's the other half went into a female child. And they spend the rest of their lives trying to reunite one another together. That's pagan philosophy out the wazoo. And we baptized it and brought it in here with the mindset that there can be only one individual that God has in mind for me. This may sound radical, but I believe that there are many folk that you could have and be a solid match under God that God could bless. Not one. And the Bible backs me up. Which one was Jacob's soulmate? Was it really Rachel? That's the one he liked. But that's not even the one when he got ready to die that he chose to be buried with. He said, bury me with Leah. Was it really? Which was, so I'm just giving an illustration. Who was David's soulmate? Was it Bathsheba? Did she become his soulmate after he killed her husband or before? Was that a part of God's will? So when we get that soulmate, that there's only one, we start messing some things up. Here's the foundation. If I find someone who loves God more than they love me, and that's not going to change, and who I love God more than I love them, and we are both growing as quickly as we can to that direction, and we have those things in common that lead in that direction, God can make that work. God can make that work. But the key word in it is work. Marriage, at its best, is work. And it involves me making a decision. The problem with did I find the right one is when I see issues in somebody that I'm not sure about, I don't want to do the work around making this work. I keep thinking to myself, maybe I married the wrong one. Maybe the right one is out there and I ruined it by, and you're messing things up. And the bottom line is, it's going to work if I'm willing to put into the work. You know that the divorce rate for arranged marriages is a fraction of the divorce rate for us here in this country who let's go out and find the one. How does that happen? You mean my dad, my mom, my big brother has a better chance of finding somebody that I can stay with the rest of my life? At the end of the day, I believe it's about I've decided this is what it is I'm going to do. Thinking about the one, and if this really was the one, then they would like the same food I like. They would like the same music that I like. No, later for that. Working with what it is God's giving you knowing that this person is in the direction that God has, those are the kinds of things that make a marriage work.
Pastor, we're almost in the time. I think we're a little bit over time, but I really want to get your input on two final things.
Sure.
We tend to see, what's going on in this world, and you and I spoke at the very beginning about how we're glad to be out of the dating world, and we're glad to not be dating at this point in time, because things are so confusing, things are so backwards, things are being thrown left and right. And one of the things that I've seen come up, and I think it's one of the things that has infiltrated every aspect of Christianity at this point, and it's a battle that's going on, is about same-sex dating, and it's causing a lot of confusion in our young people. I saw some of it growing up, as far as 15 years ago. How do we address that situation? How do we address that topic? When it comes to dating, is it obviously we know where the church stands, but I'm curious about it. Can I test the waters? Can I not test the waters? What should I do if I have these type of urges or these types of feelings?
Okay. That's a real hot topic that we, as a church, don't like to address. And I believe we're going to have to start addressing it. I believe it's more complicated than just making a quick stand 5 minutes before we're out on an interview. Mm-hmm. That's where we get into trouble. I think there's many areas that are there. So first, let me say this. I believe that the Christian church, and I put in the Seventh-day Adventist church when it comes to that, has not done what God would have us to do in loving, embracing, and helping to grow folk who have questions, who have meanings, however those may have come about. I believe that we are wrong when we think we're going to post a deacon at the door and say, this is not for you. That's not what Scripture says. This is a house for all people. That's one thing. And we are going to live to rue the day, because now we're at a stage where it's no longer folks out there. These are our young people. These are our children. This is the pastor's son and the pastor's daughter who are dealing with this. And we haven't done a very good job of trying to reach out and address that. At the same time, I recognize that we can't, the Bible speaks clearly in my understanding of what a married relationship is supposed to constitute. And if I stand on anything but Scripture, then I'm going to fall for anything. So I got to make that stand that's there. That's a separate issue, because there are folks who are going to go to hell, not because they had homosexual relationships, but because they had heterosexual relationships that were outside of what God had in mind. Which sin is worse? And I think, again, we have this double standard that bespeaks of something that God, we don't have any problem with people who are heterosexual that are, after church is over with, we're going over to your house for potluck, and we'll be back next Sabbath. And we'll be singing in the choir, and we'll be singing in the praise team. And we look at that, and we prefer them not living that way, but please keep coming to church, y'all. Please keep coming to church. And we miss the point there. So there's that aspect. When it comes to somebody and here's the thing, if I have questions, I should be able to go to a place that it's safe for me to ask my questions. We have not, as a church, proven ourselves safe for anybody's questions. We don't even find a safe place for somebody who's got questions about Ellen White. If you say, I've got a question about the authenticity of Ellen White, oh, you're not really faithful. But here's my thought. Jesus had 12 disciples who were doubting him the whole time he was alive. He didn't throw any of them out. He loved it. Matter of fact, he put them to work, even with their questions. So having a safe place where I can ask questions and figure this thing out is part of the issue. One of the reasons why we have it is because we've been a church of secrecy. We believe, like the military used to believe, don't ask, don't tell me. So there's no place for that dialogue to happen. Do you know where they do feel safe? Homosexual community will talk to them. They'll answer their questions. They won't feel condemned. So I believe that this must take place, and that's not a popular stand at all. So I didn't answer the question. There's not enough time to get into what it is I believe in about that, and there are shades of it that go all over the place. And most folks were at such a razor's edge that as soon as I say the Bible says, there are people that are like, oh, I know what he thinks, and they're clicking. They're turning this interview off. They've already bounced. They've already gone to something else. He's not really inclusive, and I bet if I showed up at his church, wait a minute, this is a much more complicated issue than any of us might think. So let's have those dialogues. Let's be a place where we can have those dialogues, and I'll see you next Sabbath. And I think that's where the rubber meets the road, so we can have those conversations. We can't answer those questions in this interview for somebody who's really, really dealing, but we can provide a place where they can come and repeatedly have conversations.
And I think at its core, that's kind of what I was leaning towards, is that this needs to be a separate conversation all on its own.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot to unpack here, and
Conversations, plural.
Conversations. Thank you, Pastor.
Yeah.
But I do think that it's one of those things that we need to have not only our stance, but like you said, you know, we need to have open arms, open hearts, embrace people, knowing that we all have faults.
Yes.
All of us.
Yes.
You know, and like you said, we tend to look at one sin over the other. You know, if you smoke pot, that's not as bad, but if you have, you know, sexual relations outside of marriage, or you commit adultery, that's on a whole different level. And there's a whole bunch of different conversations that we can have just out of this. And we kind of stayed on one certain topic, which is, you know, sexual purity while you're dating. But there really is a lot to unpack here. And, you know, like you said, an hour interview isn't going to do it justice, but I really appreciate your time. And, you know, I'm sorry to kind of throw in that question in there at the end, but I really did want to get your input on what's a good starting point? Where should we kind of jump off from? And even though it's not, you know, a full-fledged interview on that specific topic, it does give us something to think about. You know, and I think you made a couple of very good points where you said that the disciples themselves doubted Jesus, and he didn't reject them.
Yeah.
The disciples themselves didn't fully understand, and they questioned Jesus, and they said, are you really the Son of God? And he says, do you not see me? Have you not been with me this whole time? And yet he still entrusted them with work, with his mission. And I think, like you said, that's a good place to start. What is our mission? What is our goal? Is it to lead people to salvation? Or is it to condemn them from their sins at the door and say, you are not holy enough, please leave?
You know, and it's such a hypocritical thing when we look at, you know, I've heard a lot of people say, well, you're going to ruin our standard. Standard? I was sinking deep in sin, far from the peaceful shore. That's our standard. That's all of us. Just because my flavor of sin is more acceptable to folk than your flavor of sin, who am am I to be able to tell you you can't work on your salvation there? You realize the Bible speaks infinitely more about gossip than it does about homosexuality. But there's nobody breaking down the doors to kick all the gossipers out of the church. What is our standard? Our standard is we are sinners saved by grace. That's what our standard is. And anytime we start thinking that there is this level of purity that we bring to the table, that someone's struggle, we are too pure to address somebody and embrace somebody who's going through whatever it is that they're going through, then we've lost the standard. The standard is that grace works regardless of where we are. And if we're checking people at the door, then we believe that our God is too weak to address the questions, embrace the individual, and save the soul.
Again, Pastor, I want to thank you so much for your time, for you, sitting with us, having these difficult conversations, because all of this is difficult conversations. It's something that we as a church are not speaking enough about because we are maybe too afraid to deal with the consequences that come after it, but it's a very important thing to talk about, and I'm sure we'll have you on for another episode where we can address a lot of the questions that we still didn't get to that are still relevant to our young people and even to us, because the way that we treat the young people that are dating, the way that we communicate with them, the way that we act around them, it all reflects back to our Christian character. So, Pastor, I really want to thank you for taking the time out to talk with us. We hope to have you back out. And for you, the audience, we want to thank you again for joining us for another episode of On the Couch. We'll see you next time when we speak about more subjects on dating, marriage, family life, family dynamics, and finance. Thank you.
God bless.